Hey everybody, welcome to the video. We are here breaking down the Advent Health 400 at Kansas Speedway. And while it's not the most exciting track in the world, I'm still kind of excited for it just due to the fact that hopefully it should be a little bit more projectable as it's your cookie cutter mile and a half track, although I'm sure the next gen car will certainly have something to say just about that. But the past month or so now, we've been at kind of unique tracks: Talladega, Bristol Dirt, a bunch of short tracks in Martinsville, Richmond, Dover, and you can kind of throw in Darlington, although it's kind of its own beast. So I'm kind of looking forward to getting back to Kansas, although once we have the race on, I'm not sure exactly how excited I'm going to be about it. But with the way practice and qualifying shaked out, it looks like it's going to be a pretty fun slate this weekend. But as always, if you are brand new here, my name is Pennell. I break down the NASCAR DFS slate each and every single weekend on this channel. You can also catch me live on Sunday mornings, although this weekend it's going to be about an hour before lock, around 2 p.m. If you want to come in, hang out, ask me all the questions you want, I'll be more than happy to do so. And you can also follow me over on the Osmo YouTube and website, doing shows, doing articles, and all that fun stuff. So you can feel free to check me out if you do want some extra content over on Osmo. And if you do end up enjoying today's free content, all I ask in return is if you can leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. I'll be here all season long, so if you're going to keep coming back, you might as well subscribe and help me out. And it helps you out because it makes it easier to view all the videos in the future. Make sure you hit the notification bell and feel free to comment down below agreeing or disagreeing with anything I had to say throughout today's video. Or if you just want to tell me hi or I suck, you can certainly do that as well. And if we could get 300 plus likes once again, I got over 350 last weekend. Truly do appreciate it. You guys kill it each and every single weekend. It's something really small, but it does help me out, and it does go a long way in the YouTube algorithm, so I do appreciate it. So if we could hit it once again, that'd be absolutely awesome. And unless you want to hear me talk about the sponsor of the show, Prize Picks, where you can get a free instant deposit match bonus up to $100 using the code CPEN, either at prizepicks.com, use the link down below. I don't think I have anything else for this intro, so let's dive right into this week's preview. And as previously mentioned, this is the Advent Health 400 at Kansas Speedway. There's your outline of the track. It's a low wear, intermediate mile and a half track, cookie cutter, nothing too special about it. Pretty comparable to tracks like Texas, Charlotte, and a couple of others, as well as Las Vegas that we were there earlier in the season. But you can also throw in some other tracks too, which I have a full comprehensive list in my breakdown each and every single week. And we have 267 laps, which means we have just about 187 dominator points available to us. So not quite as important dominator points as we've had the past couple of weeks at Dover or Darlington. Also not quite on the level of tracks like Martinsville or Richmond. It's going to be exactly what we had at Las Vegas earlier in the season. So typically at mile and a half tracks, I want usually 1 to 2 dominators. You can stretch up to 3 depending on the pricing of drivers for where they're starting and looking at practice, which we will get into. But for the most part, a lot of your laps will probably end up having 2 dominators, and I'm probably going to stick with that for the majority of mine. And moving on to the driver by driver breakdown portion of this video, if you just want my overall thoughts really quick on the pricing this weekend, I think DraftKings did a solid job as far as how they priced the slate. Now, do I agree with some of the drivers and where they're priced? No, not really, but having one guy above $11,000 I think seems fitting for a mile and a half track, but I don't really think it should be Kyle Larson with the way this season has fared. Kind of just seems like they're still beefing up those 2021 numbers, and times have certainly changed in the next gen car, but we'll talk about it. Drivers that I think are overpriced and underpriced, and with the way practice and qualifying that went this weekend, I think we definitely have a very interesting slate. We have several drivers starting in the rear. We have a couple cheap guys, and I say cheap relatively for the guys we normally see up front in the front row this weekend that seem to have some really fast cars. So it looks like it's going to be a really fun slate, and I am pretty excited to break this down. And keep in mind, practice and qualifying just now ended, so I've not yet written projections, ownership, so it's kind of just my first real thoughts on the entire slate as a whole. So you're getting them here, first raw thoughts, and then we'll kind of get a more updated version on the Patreon and on the live stream tomorrow. That's going to be at around 2 p.m. Eastern. And speaking of the Patreon, if you do want to support the channel, link can be found down below for that. We got a couple hundred people over there. Best NASCAR DFS community out there. Projections for all sites. And I do preview the sheet for you guys over on YouTube if you want full access to it. That is where you can find it, where it's got all the projections, ownership projections, the optimizer, Discord community. There's options for just that if you want to come in, hang out, ask all the questions you want. Great community of people over there. Everyone is willing to help. I do cover other sports as well, not just NASCAR. So anyway, getting into this weekend's slate, I guess, we have Kyle Larson up top, $11,100, $14,000 over on FanDuel. He is starting in third. These odds were right before practice, so I'm sure they're going to change a little bit, but I don't think Kyle Larson's going to move too much because he did qualify well and practice wasn't too bad for Larson. And starting in third, if this was last year, we would be all aboard the Kyle Larson train. But with the way it's been so far this season, it's going to be kind of hard to get to him at that price point because we have other guys that I think are in better spots to dominate that are much cheaper than him this weekend. He's also just, with how expensive he is, it's not going to be that easy to fit him in. 7th in the 5 lap in practice, 3rd in the 10 lap. We did not get a lot of guys that ran 10 laps in practice. I believe we only got 10, which, yeah, Harrison Burton rounded out the top 10 there. So I'm not sure how much we can really look into the 10 lap data outside of the guys that were near the very top, because I assume they are going to have some pretty fast cars this weekend. If you're looking at Larson's numbers overall at Kansas, they're obviously very good. He did win one of these races here last season. And if you're looking at his recent finishes at similar tracks, he finished 6th at Dover this year, 2nd at Las Vegas. Kind of got lucky at the Las Vegas race. Wasn't that all that fast. Finished 1st at Auto Club. Obviously won the most recent Kansas race. And 1st at Texas last year and 1st at Charlotte. So obviously the last season's numbers, yeah, definitely a bit beefed up. And obviously he did pretty well finish-wise earlier in the season. So I do understand why he's this expensive. I do understand why Vegas does have some pretty good odds on him to win this race. And if you're looking at the track type form, which does involve a lot of races from last season, he's absolutely blowing everybody out of the water, especially in terms of dominator points. He's at 123.1. I think the second best is Denny Hamlin at 23.9. Like, it wasn't even close last year. He definitely had a huge edge. That has not really been the case this season, because if you're looking at the loop data for 2022 at just the normal tracks, excluding super speedways and road courses, we're talking only 31 DraftKings points per race, an average running position of 12.9. Did have a win, but he was not the best car in that race. 3 top 5s, 15 laps led per race, and 12.9 fast laps. So it's definitely fallen off quite the cliff, and there's definitely been a lot better drivers so far this season. So Kyle Larson's someone I'm going to get to a little bit too. I'm probably going to end up being a bit underweight just so I can get exposure to some other drivers that I think are in better spots and much cheaper. And moving down to his teammate Chase Elliott, $10,900. Starting in 14th, he's kind of in a weird spot just because he's not in that range where I really expect him to get up front quite early. He's also not starting super far back to where he's an elite place differential play like last weekend where he was starting in the 30s. 14th is kind of that dead spot where I don't think I'm going to be all that excited about playing Chase Elliott. Like, yeah, he's very good at Kansas, but practice wasn't super impressive. Hendrick didn't really impress me too much outside of Alex Bowman's 4-lap run. But yeah, Chase Elliott was 15 in the 5-lap, 8th in the 10-lap. Obviously, the numbers at Kansas are very good. I mean, some of the best in the entire field. He's got 4 top 5s and 5 top 10s here with a good chunk of dominator points. Won the race at Dover, 26th Auto Club, 9th at Las Vegas. Finished 2nd in the most recent Kansas race last season. Obviously, he has good track type form, and if you're looking at his numbers so far this year, he's been one of the best drivers in NASCAR with his 56.6 DraftKings points per race. Has a win, 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s, and a good chunk of dominator points as far as the lap sled and fast laps go. The problem is at $10,900, starting in 14th, it's not going to be an easy path for him to get up front because there's going to be several much faster cars, at least according to practice, that are going to start ahead of him. So I'm probably not going to get to too much Chase Elliott this weekend. Can he be a top 5 contender? Sure, but at his price point, you're going to have to get him up front to dominate because there's going to be some other drivers that are cheaper than him that are in better spots to dominate. They can rack up dominator points quite quickly. Martin Truex Jr., $10,400. He is starting in 9th, and heading into the weekend, I've kind of been all aboard the JGR train plus Chastain, which we will talk about in a little bit. And JGR looked pretty strong in practice, and they didn't qualify in the pole with Christopher Bell. Kyle Busch got up there. Martin Truex Jr. starting in 9th. Practice, I wouldn't say he blew me out of the water. Just didn't really impress me too much. Was 16th in the 5-lap, 5th in the 10-lap, but obviously I'm looking at Las Vegas quite a bit as far as comparisons, and JGR was super fast at Vegas. Martin Truex honestly could have won that race. Kyle Busch was up there as well, but they ended up getting the late caution, which kind of screwed things up. But Truex had a very good car at Vegas, and I think he'll be fast once again. He's kind of in a weird spot, similar to Chase Elliott, where, you know, he's not starting super close to the front. He's starting a little bit closer than Elliott, so the path's a little bit easier for him to dominate. And I do think he's going to end up being faster than Elliott during this race, but the price point's what makes it a little bit tougher. If he was in the 9K range, I would probably get to more Truex. I'm still going to have some Truex exposure, though, for sure. I'm going to try to at least be even with the field. I would not mind being overweight just because I'm going to be pretty heavy on JGR, I feel, this weekend, so I don't want to completely disregard Truex. It's just the price point's going to make it a little bit tougher to get to him than some of the other JGR drivers. And speaking of JGR, we have Denny Hamlin, $10,200 on DraftKings, a little bit steeper over on FanDuel at $13,000, but he is starting 18th. He had a flat tire during practice, but overall, I am not going to shy away from Denny Hamlin this weekend. I know the finishes have not been there. He has just really been the most unlucky driver in NASCAR so far to start the season. If you're looking at his 2022 numbers, he has an average finish of 18.7, has one win, kind of got lucky with that, but also one top 10, and we are in the middle of May, and Denny Hamlin has one top 10 at the normal tracks. And I believe that extends to just every single race so far this year with one top 10 finish. Just been extremely unlucky. He still has some dominant points to go with it. And he's had some really fast cars. He had the fastest car at Dover, arguably, had the fastest car at Las Vegas, and issues in both races. And obviously had a very fast car last weekend at Darlington. Also had another issue where just, the finishes have not been there for Denny Hamlin, but he has had a fast car at $10,200. Feels like a similar part of last weekend where he had some PD upside, and I think he's going to be fast once again. I mean, I like all the JGR cars, so I can't dismiss Denny Hamlin. And this has obviously been a very good track for him. He has 2 wins, 3 top 5s, so at $10,200, you have some PD upside, and I think he has some Dominator upside as well. So I would certainly have some Denny Hamlin. Obviously, the flat tire kind of killed his practice numbers. He was 8th in the 1 lap, and then we didn't get anything in the 5 and 10, and so not a ton of data to work with there, but I do assume he's going to have a fast car. Moving down to the 9K range, we have several very good plays here. We'll start with William Byron, $9,900. He is starting in 13th. I don't think I'm going to be too interested in Byron. I just wasn't super fast in practice. Was 20th in the 1 lap, 12th in the 5 lap. Obviously, he's very strong at intermediate tracks. He did finish 5th at Vegas earlier this season, 34th Auto Club, but we can chalk that up to bad luck. Just wasn't very good at Dover. You have to keep in mind he wasn't a backup car, but overall just wasn't his day at Dover. But so far this year, he's definitely had one of the best cars, one of the best running positions at 7.7, actually the best in this data set that I'm using, the best drive rating, has a win, 3 top 5s, and obviously a good chunk of Dominator points as well, though Martinsville does certainly beef those up quite a bit. But starting in 13th, again, he's in that weird spot similar to Chase Elliott. He's $1,000 cheaper, so I feel like I may end up on more William Byron just because of that, because he's a lot easier to fit in, but I don't really plan on being super overweight on William Byron this weekend. But someone I am going to be overweight on is Kyle Busch, $9,800. Love the price point on DraftKings. On FanDuel, it's a lot harder to get to at $13,500. But he's starting in 6th. He's part of the JGR crew that I said that I really liked heading into the weekend. And overall, they look pretty strong in practice. I mean, Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. didn't really blow you away. But Kyle Busch and Christopher Bell were both very fast. And I'm liking Kyle Busch a lot. He's been very fast this year, kind of similar to some other drivers where the finishes really haven't been there to show for it, as he has 1 top 5 finish. Has 5 top 10s, but just hasn't been able to get into the top 5 much. But I assume he's going to be one of the cars to beat. He did open with tied for the best odds to win this race with Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson. And as of right now, I do think he's got the best chance between those 3. I assume these odds might change a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be anything too drastic. But very strong in practice, was 2nd in the 1 lap, 5th in the 5 lap, and 2nd in the 10 lap. And he's been great this year. I like the price point a lot. Definitely think he's a fantastic play over on DraftKings. I think he's cash and tournament viable. Another driver that's been on fire this year, Ross Chastain, $9,700. He's starting in 11th. Didn't really get a whole lot of him out of practice. Was 4th in the 1 lap. But with as good as he's been this year at every single track type, whether it's an intermediate, short track, super speedway, road course, whatever it is, you name it, he has been really, really good. So I have a hard time not getting to a lot of Ross Chastain. I certainly plan on being overweight to him. I know the price is getting up there, close to $10,000, but let's be honest, Chastain should probably be close to, if not the most expensive driver on the slate, as fast as he's been this year. He had the best car last week at Darlington, ended up wrecking. Nothing you can really do about that, but he's been so fast, 4 top 5s, a good chunk of Dominator points. Fast at Vegas earlier in the season. I just don't see why we wouldn't like Ross Chastain. I'm hoping the price point scares some people away from him, but he should certainly be a contender by the end of the day, and certainly has a good chance of being up front and dominating. And then Joey Logano, $9,600. Talk about chalk. He's starting in 34th, coming off a huge week last weekend where he was on the pole, dominated, won the race, dumped William Byron. Now he's starting just about dead last here in 34th. I have a hard time seeing him not be one of the highest owned drivers on the entire slate, which obviously, if you're playing tournaments, there's certainly reasons to get away from that, because I would say there's a very slim chance Joey Logano ends up getting up front and dominating at any point in this race. And if he does not do that, while the floor is nice, he's a lock in cash games. A guy like Ross Chastain or Kyle Busch could easily outscore him if they got up front and led 100 laps. So keep that in mind in tournaments. It would make some sense to be maybe slightly underweight on Joey Logano. I'm not saying he's a bad play, but the Dominators do carry some more, heavy weight to them when it comes to tournaments. I still think there's a chance Joey Logano could be optimal in tournaments. You could probably, again, I'm not here in projections, so I'm not really sure what my roster construction is going to look like. But if you could fit in Kyle Busch and Ross Chastain in addition to Joey Logano, that is certainly one way to go about it, because it's not like Logano is super expensive. If he was close to $11,000, completely different ball game. But at his price point, you can certainly fit in a couple dominators in addition to Joey Logano, and especially since in that 8K range, we have two guys starting in the front row that had fast cars in practice and can certainly dominate as well. So there's definitely a easier path for Logano to be optimal his price point, especially with the way qualifying shaked out this weekend. But we don't really have to go over the numbers. He's starting nearly dead last, and as long as he doesn't wreck, he's going to be a top 10 contender, and that's like nearly 25 spots gained. So yeah, he's a very good play this weekend with a super safe floor. And if you're playing cash games, by all means, just lock him in and move on. Alex Bowman, $9,300. He is starting in 8th. I do like the price point. The Hendrick cars didn't really impress me too much in practice, but Bowman was solid in the 5 lap where he was 4th. If you're looking at his numbers at Kansas, has some pretty solid numbers here overall with an average finish inside the top 10, has 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, not a ton of dominator points, but he has been able to get up front. Did win the race at Las Vegas early in the season, did finish 5th at Dover, finished 11th in the most recent Kansas race. He's an interesting tournament play. I'm not going to get to a lot of Bowman. I'm going to be very heavy on the 3 drivers we just talked about with Busch, Chastain, and Logano, so I'm not sure how much Bowman I'm going to get to, but I don't think he's necessarily a bad play. Ryan Blaney, $9,100. I love the price point. He's starting in 10th, and normally I would be all about this with Ryan Blaney at this price point, especially with how good he's been at intermediate tracks, and he's had a very fast car so far this year. For whatever reason it is, though, he has some really bad luck at Kansas. He tends to run very well, average running position of 10th, but an average finish of 23rd with an average of 10.7 DraftKings points per race with 0 top 5s and only 1 top 15 to show for it the past 6 races. I'm not sure what it is, just a lot of bad luck for him at Kansas. Finished 36th at Vegas early in the season, 26th at Dover, but he has had a very fast car so far this year. One of the better driver ratings, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, and a good chunk of dominator points. But $9,100, I'm going to have to get to at least some of Ryan Blaney because of his cheap price point. We know the upside with him, but again, I do prefer the 3 I talked about in the 9K range more. And then this 8K range is pretty loaded with some good plays as well, which does make it a little bit tougher to get to Ryan Blaney, even though he's at a really suppressed price point. So dropping down to the 8K range, I've been kind of hyping them up the entire time, but got to talk about him. So we'll start with Tyler Reddick here, $8,900, $8,500 over on FanDuel. He is starting in 2nd. And it's going to be hard not to like him. I'm usually always overweight on Tyler Reddick just because I love the talent, and he's always a little bit underpriced in my opinion. But up to $9,000 this week, starting in 2nd, maybe people shy away from him a little bit. But he was fast in practice, 3rd in the 1 lap, 3rd in the 5 lap, and obviously was fantastic in qualifying. I thought he was going to get the pole, but Christopher Bell just continued his dominance from what he did in round 1 and what he showed in practice. But you got to like some Reddick here. He's got a chance to dominate. I could see him hanging within the top 3, top 5 for the majority of this race, picking up fast laps, and he has the potential to get up front. I like the price point. I'm not sure how many people are going to get the Bell and Reddick in the same lineup, so I do think Reddick is your direct pivot off of Bell if you want to get off of some of that chalk, but I think Reddick's a fantastic play in tournaments. Not going to get there in cash games, though I can't imagine, nearly $9,000. Kevin Harvick, $8,700. I feel like he's a bit underpriced this weekend. He's starting in 23rd, was 30th in the 1 lap in practice. Also put up a obviously poor qualifying run for where he's starting in the 20s here. Obviously a great track for him, but I can't really use track history too much these days. And plus Kevin Harvick hasn't been overly dominant for a couple of seasons now. But if you're looking at what he's done so far this year, he's been pretty consistent. He's just not really getting up front or dominating, but he has an average finish of 7.7. 50 DraftKings points per race last weekend. Did kind of beef that DK points per race number up a bit starting in the very back, but 2 top 5s, 5 top 10s. The only problem is 0 laps led per race and 6.1 fast laps. But you don't really have to dominate when you're $8,700. You just really have to get a really good finish with maybe some fast laps along the way, which there's a path for him to be optimal starting in 2030. Could certainly contend for a top 10. The problem is other guys in this price range have dominator upside with Reddick and Christopher Bell. So if these guys stay up front and dominate, so there's a decent chance we don't really see Harvick in the optimal unless he absolutely kills it during this race. So I'll have some exposure to Kevin Harvick, but I'll probably rather get to the potential dominator plays instead, especially in tournaments. And speaking of Christopher Bell, $8,400 on DraftKings, only $8,200 over on FanDuel. He is starting on the pole. And I know he's not your prototypical dominator really, but we have to have a lot of interest in Bell this weekend. He absolutely killed it in practice. Was 5th in the 1 lap, but 1st in the 5 and 10 lap runs. Obviously put up a blazing fast qualifying run, got him on the pole. Hard not to like Bell here. I said I was really heavily invested in JGR heading into the weekend, and they kind of backed it up, and I have no reason to believe that Bell won't have the car to beat as of right now. If you're just looking at what happened on the track Saturday evening, he looks like he has the best car. He was absolutely flying, and he's been very solid so far this year. Yeah, finished 4th at Dover, 10th at Las Vegas. He's had a fast car at $8,400. If he can lead a decent portion of stage 1, or maybe even more than that, I mean, as of right now, it looks like he has the best car in the field right now. Obviously, changes can be made and things can happen, but if he leads a good chunk of this race at $8,400 and hangs around the top 5 all day, which he has done in several races so far this year, good chance we see Bell in the optimal. So I think you can play him in cash games, play him in tournaments. I like him a lot. I would rather be overweight rather than underweight on Christopher Bell this weekend. It's a really nice price point. And then we have Tyler Reddick's teammate Austin Dillon here, $8,000 on DK. Love the price point over on FanDuel for those of you that play over there. Only $6,000. I do think he's a really good cheap play over there. Just seems a bit underpriced, because if you're looking at everybody else in this price range over on DK, they're all around $8,000 to $9,000. Austin Dillon's price just got nuked a bit. I know his odds in Vegas aren't nearly as close as these other 3 drivers, but if Tyler Reddick has a fast car, you have to assume Austin Dillon's not going to be too far behind. I know we didn't get a ton of practice data from him, but he was 6th in the 1 lap and Tyler Reddick was 3rd. So I have to assume Austin Dillon's not going to suck during this race. Should be a top 15, top 10 contender like he is at most intermediate tracks. They finished 11th at Las Vegas earlier in the season, then 2nd at Auto Club. I think Dillon should be a very solid play. 10th at Kansas. A little bit priced up on DK, $8,000, but it's nothing too terrible. It's just the 8K range is absolutely loaded, so Dillon will go overlooked for sure. So I do think he's a decent low-owned tournament play. Obviously wouldn't get there in cash games though. And dropping down to the 7K range, we have Chase Briscoe, $7,900, $7,500 on FanDuel. He's starting in 12th. I don't necessarily think he's a bad play, but I just can't imagine I'm going to get too much Chase Briscoe here, because I'm thinking about roster construction in my head. I'll probably be pretty heavy on Bell and Reddick. I'll be pretty heavy on Logano, Chastain, Kyle Busch. So I'm not really sure how much I'm going to get to this upper 7K range too much. So I think Briscoe's going to be pretty low owned for this slate, and probably going to be pretty low exposed as far as my own personal exposures go. He does have a win this year, but 1 top 5, 2 top 10s. Average finish at 15th. He's kind of in a tough spot for me to really want to play him too much. Does he have top 10 upside? Sure, but I'd rather just kind of get overexposed to guys like Bell and Reddick instead of really trying to get to too much Chase Briscoe here. Eric Jones, $7,700 on DraftKings. He is starting in 22nd. He showed some speed so far this year. Looks like he's got a top 10 car so far in practice. 10th in the 5 laps, 7th in the 10, although got to keep in mind not a lot of people ran 10 consecutive laps in practice. I think the price point might scare some people away from him. I don't think he's necessarily a bad play, but I'm not really sure how much Eric Jones I really want to get to at this price point. Does have some very good numbers at Kansas, though. 2 top 5s and 3 top 10s. Looking at similar track finishes, 10th at Dover, 31st at Vegas, but 3rd at Auto Club. And I believe that Vegas race is where he had a late caution at the end, where he was doing pretty well before that. 29th in the most recent Kansas race, but he's definitely been a lot faster this year than he has been last season. So Eric Jones, a fine tournament play, but no one I'm really going to go to my way to play. Daniel Suarez, $7,500. I think he's a better FanDuel play at $5,800, kind of similar to Austin Dillon. Wasn't very impressive in practice, though. 19th in the 5 lap, 21st in the 1 lap. I hate to use really 1 lap data, but we don't really have too many numbers to work off of here. But I think Suarez is probably going to finish somewhere close to where he starts. He certainly has top 15 upside. But again, similar to the other 2 we talked about with Briscoe and Jones, not going to go my way to play a lot of Daniel Suarez. I'll probably end up being underweight on him. Brad Keselowski, $7,400. He is starting in 30th. Had a really slow run in practice in the as he was 31st in the 1 lap. Didn't get anything after that. He's a fine PD play, but I am a little bit worried that he's just going to be a clunker all day, which we've certainly seen out of Brad Keselowski this season. 20th at Dover, 24th at Vegas, 27th at Auto Club. And if you're looking at his numbers overall this season at the normal tracks that I'm using in this data set, we're talking 14.5 DraftKings points per race with an average finish of 23rd. The PD looks really nice, but I could see him ending up being quite a bit of a trap this weekend, so I'm going to be kind of careful with my Brad Keselowski exposure. Austin Cindric starting a bit too high for me to have too much consideration. Is he worth a sprinkle? Sure, but I think I'd much rather get the Kurt Busch out of all these 3 drivers that are very similar plays. Cindric, Almirola, Kurt Busch, all starting in the top 7, all going to look like rough plays on paper. I can kind of brush on Almirola quick. I think he's somewhat viable, being 6th in the 10 lap and 11th in the 5 lap. But I'm going to be honest, I think I'd rather just get the Kurt Busch here. $7,100. I had my eye on him heading into the weekend because I thought he was way underpriced. He qualified pretty high in 5th, so this actually may be a blessing in disguise because I'm hoping it keeps some people away from him. But it looks like he's got a really fast car, and I talked about this on the Osmo video earlier in the week, so it's kind of nice that he backed this up in practice where he looks really strong. I mean, first in the 1 lap, he was the fastest overall car as far as the short run was concerned, and then second in the 5 lap, so it looks like he's got some, I hate to call it long run speed because 5 laps isn't too much, but we didn't have much data to work with. But his car looks amazing. Like, even if he doesn't do well in this race, at least he's got a pretty car to look at, but maybe it's a bit of a conspiracy theory here, but I just feel like with the paint scheme he has this weekend, Michael Jordan's not going to want to see that finish poorly. So I think Kurt Busch is going to have some extra juice this weekend. I really have nothing to back that up, but the car looks sweet. I want to play him. His price is too low. He was fast in practice. So for Kurt Busch, who just seems underpriced this year. Who just seems underpriced this weekend and has a really cool looking car. I'm serious. If you haven't seen it, look it up, or I can probably throw a picture on the screen. But I'm definitely all aboard Kurt Busch. He's got several top 10 finishes this year. Got a bit unlucky last weekend with the penalty, then ended up getting wrecked at the end. But I could see him kind of hanging around the top 5 all day, picking up fast laps, and that price point, it's just really good. I think he's a really, really good tournament play this weekend. Dropping down to the 6K range, we have unfortunate chalk and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. He's starting at 36, but if you've rostered him the past 2 weekends, it has worked out quite nicely as he has definitely paid off quite a bit. Low price point once again, but had an issue in practice. He is now starting dead last. He was top 10 in the 5 lap in practice, was 19th in the 1 lap. If Ricky doesn't wreck in this race, which I know is sometimes a tough task for him, I did it in practice, but hopefully he got the wreck out of his system this weekend early on, at least not during the race. But finished 2nd at Dover last weekend, 21st at Vegas, 10th at Auto Club. If he can get anywhere around a top 20 below 7K starting dead last, he's going to pay off. If you're playing cash games, it sounds weird saying it, but please lock in Ricky Stenhouse Jr. In tournaments, I understand wanting to get away from that. Like in tournaments, Kurt Busch over Ricky Stenhouse could certainly be a way to get different because Ricky's going to obviously be a very heavily owned driver, so you gotta be careful with him. We know Ricky's been very bad for the majority of this season. He's definitely picked it up as of late. Gonna be pretty high on though, and as long as he doesn't wreck, he's gonna be a pretty good play at the end of the day. Same can be said for Chris Buescher, although I would say Buescher's a little bit easier to trust. He's $6,700, only $5,200 over on FanDuel. He's starting in 35th. Don't really care about track history. Don't really care about anything else. It's just due to the fact that he's starting just about dead last, and as long as he doesn't wreck, he's gonna be close to getting 15-20 spots during this race, and I want that in my lineup at $6,700. If you're playing cash games, lock in some Chris Buescher. Bubba Wallace, 24th. He is $6,400. Doesn't have a great history at Kansas. Doesn't really care about track history too much. We can look at some of the recent finishes at similar tracks this year. We have a 16th at Dover, 25th at Vegas, 19th at Auto Club, finished 14th last year at Kansas. His teammate Kurt Busch looks like he's got a very fast car this weekend. Bubba Wallace didn't really give us too much data to work with, just an 18th in the 1 lap. I think he's a fine pivot off of Buescher and Stenhouse, but let's be honest, projections are not going to like him nearly as much as Stenhouse and Buescher, but the ownership's going to be a lot lower if you're looking for a tournament play. And the same exact thing can really be said for Cole Custer. The problem is he's starting a lot further up in 16th. He's $6,200. Could he kind of hold his ground and ride around the top 15 all day? Sure, he does have an average finish of 15.8 at Kansas, has 1 top 10 and 2 top 15s and 3 top 20s. He also finished 15th at Dover and 11th at Auto Club. Like, it's not a sexy play. It's not going to feel great, especially with the major place differential drivers you have right around him. But again, if you're trying to get different in tournaments, might not be the worst thing you could ever do. But saying it out loud just doesn't feel very good. Justin Haley, $5,900. He's starting in 15th. Kind of the same exact play as Cole Custer. If you're looking at their practice numbers, though, it's nothing too impressive. I mean, even Cole Custer, he was outside the top 20 as far as the 1 and 5 lap were concerned. And Justin Haley, 23rd in the 1 lap, and then 18th in the 5 laps. So again, it's going to be hard to get to really either of those two. I'd probably rather get to some of the safer plays. Noah Gragson, $5,500. He's starting in 28th. Terrible in practice, 33rd in the 1 lap, 24th in the 5 lap. But again, if he finished 24th in this race at $5,500 starting in 28th, that is not the end of the world. At his price point, I think it makes him viable. Is it a pretty play? No, but we can't really get too picky with some of the drivers we have down low. Harrison Burton, a pretty similar play, 20th in the 5 lap, 25th in the 1 lap. Was 10th in the 10 lap, but that was second to last outside of Josh Bilicki for all the drivers that did run 10 laps. Now, it was some pretty good drivers that ran 10 laps. I'm not going to fault him for that. He's got top 20 upside for sure, but if you're looking at his overall numbers this season, I wouldn't say it's really going to be anything that makes you feel too confident in getting a top 20. Average finish of 23rd, running position of 24.1. Looking at his actual finishes at similar tracks so far this season, 24th, 16th, and 33rd. He's a fine play down low. We really don't have someone that really stands out too much. I think a lot of people go more so balanced to make sure they're cheapest drivers like a Chris Buescher or a Ricky Stenhouse. So I'm not really sure how much we're going to get to the 5K range this weekend, which makes me think, guys like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott are not going to be extremely high owned because a lot of people are going to live in that 9K range and you're going to see 8K pick it up. And I mean, again, if you can play a dominator lineup with 2 Doms with Tyler Reddick and Christopher Bell, and you're not even breaking $9,000 in either of those drivers, so you really might not have to dumpster dive too much this weekend. Michael McDowell, $5,300. He could be the guy people get to the most starting in 25th because he's put up some pretty good finishes in recent memory. Finished 17th at Dover. I forget where he finished last week at Darlington, but I know it was a very strong finish. I just don't have it on here because I'm not going to compare Darlington to Kansas much. But Michael McDowell does not have a bad history at Kansas either. If you're just looking at track history, he actually has 4 top 20s here the past 6 races. At his price point, he's probably the one I feel the most comfortable with, especially with his recent track forms. So I'll get to some Michael McDowell, but it's not like someone I'm going to play 30+% of, at least I don't think as of right now. And then after that, we really start getting thinned out. We do have Corey LaJoie, $5,200. He's starting in 20th, wasn't awful in practice, 22nd in the 5 lap, 9th in the 10 lap. But I don't really have too much nice to say about Corey LaJoie. He did finish 18th at Dover, 15th at Las Vegas. I will give him that. Starting in 20th, he might be able to hold his ground, which at $5,200, like it's not a lot of place differential starting in 20th, but there's the outside chance where he does finish in the top 20. And if he does that at that price point, it can work, but he's a tournament play only for me. But it might be a better play than Burton or Gregson, especially if he's lower owned. But I mean, all these guys really don't stand out too much for me. Dillon, $5,100, kind of a similar play to Corey LaJoie, was 17th in the 5 lap in practice. Looking at his finishes at similar tracks this year, 27th at Dover, 20th at Vegas, 17th at Auto Club. I would view him as a very similar play to Corey LaJoie personally. I feel like I can trust his car a little bit more. And obviously Ty Dillon's got a lot of experience, but 2 guys that just don't really stand out to me too much. But they do have some track position to work with. Dropping down to the 4K range, the only one I would even consider is Todd Gilliland at $4,900. He's starting in 31st. Looking at practice, the only thing we got was a 1-lap run, which was 34th. So not a whole lot to love there. If you're looking at the recent finishes, 28th at Dover, 23rd at Vegas, 20th at Auto Club. If he got you a 23rd or 20th, I'll tell you right now, at sub 5K, starting in 31st, you'd be pretty happy with that. His 2022 numbers overall, average finish at 23rd, average rank position at 25th. If he just gains positive spots at his price point, could he be optimal? It's possible. Do I think he's going to be optimal? Probably not, but I don't think he's going to kill you. So if you had to go really cheap this weekend, Gilliland, I wouldn't mind getting to some of. And then Bilicki, McLeod, Cody Ware, JJ Yeley, they're all always the same play. They usually always suck, although I will say Cody Ware had a pretty good finish last weekend, but there was some carnage and weird things happened. Don't look into it too much. He still wasn't in the optimal lineup despite having a really good finish for just a regular track like Darlington. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the video. I feel like that was a longer one, so if you made it all the way through, let me know down in the comments below. You guys are troopers. I do appreciate you watching the entire thing. If you did find this helpful in any way possible, leave the like down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already, and again, if you want to check out the extra content that I put a lot of work into over the entire weekend this weekend over on Patreon, link can be found down below for that. It's right beside the orange bubble. You can't miss it if you do want to support the channel, support me, and get some stuff in return. And don't forget to check out the sponsor of the show, Prize Picks. You can use code CPENN to get that instant deposit match bonus up to $100. That is free money. Use it to your advantage. There is no strings attached for new users. And if you want to check out the live stream tomorrow, it is not going to be at 11 a.m. I'm actually going to be in the Awesemo live stream at 11 a.m. So I'm going to push mine back to like around 2 or 2:30. Be like an hour or so before lock, similar to whatever I do on Awesemo. Come in, hang out, ask me questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them. And if you want to join that DraftKings contest that I host each and every single week, it is now a league, so you do get auto-invited. But if you haven't yet joined it, please do so. I will leave a link down below for you to join that, or you can just leave your DK username down below in the comments. I'd be more than happy to accommodate your needs no matter what it is. But with that being said, I wish you all the best of luck this weekend, and hopefully I will see you tomorrow for the live stream.